This shoe costs $70 and this shoe costs $150. So the question is the expensive one more comfortable? Because almost every brand does the exact same thing. They sell a budget model around $17 to $90 and then a premium one that costs anywhere between $150 to $200. And by the end of this video, I'll tell you 3 things: which shoe was actually the most comfortable overall, which cheap shoe surprised me the most, and whether spending more money really makes a difference when you're walking. So let's begin with the biggest price difference in the video. The first comparison is of the Skechers Glide Step Pro 2.0 versus the On Cloud 6. And this one is interesting because the price difference is huge. The Skechers costs around $70, while the On Cloud 6 is closer to $150. So you're paying more than double for the On. Now the first thing you'll notice when walking in these shoes is the cushioning. The Skechers actually feels softer straight away. The midsole compresses quite easily and gives you that cushioned feel underneath your foot. The On Cloud 6, instead of a soft slab of foam, it uses CloudTech pods which compress individually and create a slightly firmer, more grounded feel. For running, that can feel great, but for walking, especially over long distances, a lot of people prefer a softer, more cushioned feel. Another difference is the flexibility. The On Cloud 6 bends quite easily through the forefoot, which helps the shoe roll forward naturally when you walk. The Skechers is noticeably stiffer, which makes it feel a bit more stable, but also slightly less natural when you're walking at an easy pace. Both shoes are designed around convenience. The Glide Step Pro 2 has a slip-in heel, designed for people who want an easy step-in fit without using their hands. The On Cloud 6 has their speed laces, so once you tighten it the first time, you can slip your foot in and out. When it comes to the fit, the Skechers is more accommodating overall. And while the On Cloud 6 has a slightly wider toe box than the Cloud 5, it still tapers more than I'd personally like. So for the price, in my opinion, the Skechers actually offers a lot more value. You're getting softer cushioning, a roomier toe box, a good design, and a convenient slip-in heel. The downside is that it's a significantly heavier shoe than the On Cloud 6. With the On Cloud 6, you're paying for greater flexibility and a more responsive and grounded feel. So when it comes to walking, the Skechers works really well for short and long distance walking, whereas I think the On Cloud 6 is better for urban use, shorter walks, more of a convenient shoe overall. But in contrast to that, the next review shows where spending extra money really makes a big difference overall. Next we have the New Balance 680 versus the 880. This is a classic example of a budget trainer versus a premium daily trainer. The 680 usually costs around $80, while the 880 is closer to $140. Now when you first put these shoes on, the difference is actually quite noticeable. The 680 uses a fairly basic EVA foam midsole. It's comfortable enough, but it feels a little bit firmer and slightly flatter when you're walking longer distances. The 880 uses the Fresh Foam X, which is softer and more cushioned underfoot. You get a smoother transition from heel to toe, and overall it just feels more comfortable when you're walking for longer periods of time. The upper is also quite different. The 880 has a softer, more breathable upper that wraps around the foot better and feels more comfortable straight away. The 680 feels more basic and slightly stiffer, particularly through the midfoot. Another difference that you'll notice is the outsole. The 880 has a lot more rubber coverage, especially through the heel and the forefoot. That improves durability, but also gives you slightly better grip when you're walking on pavements or slightly wetter surfaces. The 680 has more exposed foam, which helps keep the weight down, but usually means that the shoe won't last quite as long. You also get a bit more stability in the 880. The platform is slightly wider, and the midsole feels more supportive through the midfoot. This helps keep the foot centered when you're walking longer distances. So the pros for the 680 are really the simplicity and the price. It's lightweight, comfortable enough for casual walks, and much cheaper. But the downside is that the cushioning can feel quite cloud-like initially, but it doesn't take very long for it to bottom out. And the overall build on top of the shoe is a bit more basic. The 880, on the other hand, is much more cushioned, more durable, and overall just more refined. But of course, you're paying quite a bit more for that. So when it comes to the best use cases, the 680 works well as an everyday walking shoe if you're walking shorter distances, or you like the look of it and you just want something affordable, whereas the 880 is much better suited for longer walks, or if you're spending a lot of time on your feet. But the next comparison is really interesting because the cheaper shoe actually has one big advantage. Next up we have the Brooks Launch 12 versus the Brooks Ghost 17. The Launch usually costs around $100, while the Ghost is closer to $140. So again, there's a notable jump in price. Now the Launch is designed to be a lighter, slightly more performance-orientated shoe. It uses DNA flash cushioning, which is actually the same foam Brooks use in some of their premium running shoes, including a few of their trail models. So it's not cheap cushioning at all. but the feeling underfoot is noticeably firmer and more responsive, whereas the Ghost 17 uses the DNA Loft cushioning, which makes it much more comfortable and soft underfoot. You get more impact protection, particularly if you're walking longer distances or spending a lot of time on harder surfaces. Another difference is the platform. The Launch sits on a narrow base, which makes it feel a bit more agile but also slightly less stable. The Ghost has a wider platform, which gives it a bit more planted and stable feel when you're walking. The fit is also different. The Launch tends to have a more tapered shape, particularly through the forefoot. The Ghost is a little bit more accommodating and feels slightly roomier overall. The upper construction also reflects the price difference. The Launch is a bit more minimal and less padded, while the Ghost has a more premium upper with more padding around the heel and the tongue, which adds to that extra comfort feel. Looking at the outsole, the Ghost has slightly more outsole coverage, especially through the heel. This usually improves durability if you're using the shoe to walk regularly on pavements. So the pros of the Launch are really the lighter weight and a slightly more responsive feel underfoot. But the downside for some is that the cushioning is firmer and the fit is a bit more tapered. The Ghost, on the other hand, feels softer, more stable, and overall more comfortable for longer walks. But of course, you're paying for that extra comfort. So when it comes to the best use cases, the Launch works well if you want a lighter shoe, or if you're doing shorter walks, and you want something a bit more responsive underfoot. Whereas the Ghost is better suited for longer walks, daily wear, or if you spend a lot of time on your feet. But the final comparison might actually be the most interesting one. The Asics Gel Pulse 17 and the Cumulus 28 are really good sellers in the Asics range. However, the Pulse comes in around $90 and the Cumulus at $140 to $150. So again, we're looking at a fairly big jump in price. Both shoes actually use the FF Blast cushioning, but there's an important difference here. The Pulse uses the standard FF Blast foam, which is actually a very good quality cushioning material. In fact, this foam was used in older models of the Cumulus and the Nimbus, so it's not cheap cushioning by any means. But the newer Cumulus now uses FF Blast Max cushioning, which is a softer and slightly more responsive version of that foam. When you walk in the Pulse, the cushioning feels comfortable, but slightly firmer underfoot. The Cumulus feels noticeably softer and smoother as you roll through each step. But when it comes to the budget shoes in this video, I actually think the Pulse has the best cushioning of all the cheaper models. It feels more consistent underfoot, and probably a bit more durable over time, compared to the cushioning used in the other models that we've discussed. Another difference is the geometry of the shoes. The Cumulus has a smoother heel-to-toe transition, which helps the foot roll forward more naturally when you're walking. The Pulse feels slightly flatter and a bit more basic in comparison. Looking at the outsole, again the Cumulus has thicker rubber underneath the shoe, making it more durable overall. The Pulse has more exposed foam, which can make it more vulnerable, which helps keep the cost down, but usually means the outsole won't last quite as long. The fit between the two shoes are relatively similar, but there's slightly greater taper in the Pulse 17 compared to the Cumulus 28, which has a slightly stretchier upper, especially around the forefoot. Now the Pulse upper is a really comfortable upper, it's just a bit more streamlined than what we see in the Cumulus 28, which is a bit more detailed. So the pros of the Plus really are the value. You're getting a good quality foam that used to appear in premium Asics models, and overall it actually has the best cushioning of the budget shoes in this comparison. The downside is that the upper and the outsole feels slightly more basic. The Cumulus, on the other hand, uses softer, bouncier cushioning. It has a better geometry, giving you a smoother transition from the back to the front of the shoe, and a slightly better fit on top of the shoe as well. So when it comes to the use cases, well, the Pulse can actually be used for short or long distance walking. It's got sufficient quality cushioning in there to last for a long period of time without bothering them out. And the Cumulus can do the same as well, but you're just getting a bouncier, springier, more premium feel overall. Looking back at each comparison, there are some interesting takeaways. The Skechers was probably the biggest surprise. For around $70, it offers very soft cushioning, a roomy fit, and that convenient slip-in design, which makes it a really comfortable option for everyday walking. The New Balance 680, on the other hand, is more of a basic budget trainer. It works fine for casual walking, but when you compare it directly to the 880, you can really feel the difference in cushioning and overall build quality. With Brooks, the Launch is lighter and a bit more responsive, but the Ghost clearly feels softer and more comfortable if you're walking longer distances. And with Asics, the Pulse actually has surprisingly good cushioning for the price, especially because it uses FF Blast foam, that previously appeared in the older premium models, but the newer Cumulus still feels softer and more refined overall. So if you mainly walk shorter distances, you may not need to actually spend $150 on a shoe, but if you're walking a lot or spending long hours on your feet, the more premium models usually do feel better in the long run. And if you're interested in shoes like this or these types of comparisons, I send out monthly newsletters where I share the best new walking shoes that I've tested, along with the best deals I can find on walking shoes today. You can sign up to the newsletter in the description below, and all the shoes that we discussed today have links in the description to Amazon if you want to check out their latest prices. And if you want to see the best walking shoes I've tested this year, I've compared the top models from every brand in this video right here. Once again, if you watch our channel regularly and you haven't subscribed, please do, as it's the one thing that you can do for free that makes the biggest difference to the channel.